We begin today the Gemara on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis, the Mishnah towards the bottom of the Amud. Sagt the Mishnah, Sheichet es Zevach, he shechted the carbon, and he had the following machshove: Lizroik domei bachutz, he will spray the blood outside of the azara, or miktzas domei bachutz, or even if only part of the blood he will spray outside. Lahakter emura bachutz, he's going to burn the sacrificial parts outside. Miktzas emura bachutz, or some of it outside. Lechal besare b'chutz, he will eat from the meat outside its place, could be outside Azara or outside Yerushalayim. Oy kezayis mipsare b'chutz, or a kezayis of the basar he will eat outside. Oy lechal kezayis me'oir ha'alya b'chutz, so he's going to eat a kezayis from the skin of the tail outside. So this is interesting, and there'll be a big discussion in the Gemara about this example of the tail, that he's going to eat it outside. So in all these cases, pasul. The carbon is pasul, but ve'ein by kares. There is no kares here. So this is the rule where the Mishnah tells us, this halacha, that a machshava chutz l'mekaymai, to eat or to spray or to be makter out of its place, it's going to be pasul, but not a chi of kares if you end up eating from the meat of that carbon. However, lizrak dami l'machar, if the thought is that's chutz l'zmanai, either that he's going to spray the blood tomorrow, or miktzas dami l'machar, some of the blood tomorrow, lahakter emurav l'machar, to burn the sacrificial parts in the mizbeach tomorrow, oy miktzas emurav l'machar, some of it tomorrow, lechal b'sari l'machar, to eat from the meat tomorrow, oy kezayis mipsari l'machar, or a kezayis of his meat tomorrow, oy lechal kezayis me'oir ha'alya l'machar, or a kezayis from the hide of the tail tomorrow. So in such a case, pigul, over here it is pigul, this is the machshav of chutz l'zmanoi, and therefore v'chayovin olav kares. If one eats then from this carbon later on, he'll be chayev kares. And that's even if he eats it in the time. Once the carbon becomes pigul, later if he eats from it, even in its right time, it's going to be a einish of kares. Okay, so the Gemara first focuses on this example that it brings regarding the oir of the alya, the skin of the tail. So they thought to explain that, what do you see from our Mishnah? Oir alya ka'alya domi, that the skin of the tail is like the tail itself, has the same halacha like the tail itself. Now, if that's the case, the problem is, how does the machshava over here help to passel it, or to make pigul in this case? V'hakam achashev ma'achilas mizbeach la'adam. The thought that he's having regarding the skin of the tail is really something that's supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach. The Gemara assumes at this point we're talking about the tail of a keves, of a lamb, that's supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach. And it says here that this person had the machshava that he's going to eat the oir of the alya out of its time or out of its place, but the person's going to eat it. So he's thinking regarding something that's supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach, that he is going to eat it out of its place and out of its time. In such a case, the machshava does not take effect to passel it or to make pigul out of it. So the Gemara answers, Amashmul, Homani Rabbi Eliezer. Our Mishnah actually follows an opinion that says that even in such a case, it will become passel or pigul. The Amar Rabbi Eliezer later says, Mechashvin machilis mizbeach lachilis adam umechilis adam lachilis mizbeach. That if one has a machshava regarding something that the mizbeach eats, that you sacrifice on the mizbeach, and he's thinking regarding his own eating, that he will eat it out of his place or out of its time. Or the opposite, something that a person eats, and he's thinking that he's going to burn it on the mizbeach out of its place or out of its time. This machshava takes effect to passel it or to make it pigul. What's the source for this? The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah later, it says, Hasheichet es hazevach lechoil dava she'ein darke lecho. He's shechting the carbon, thinking that he's going to eat something of it that is not made for eating for the person, or lahakter dovashein darke lahakter, or to burn something that's not made for burning. Right. So over here, in these cases, he's having the machshava whether a chutz l'zmanoi or a chutz l'mekaymai. So the Tanakama here says kosher. The kind of thought of chutz l'zmanoi, chutz l'mekaymai, since he's having the machshava for sort of the wrong thing. He's supposed to eat it, and he's thinking that he's going to burn it on the mizbeach in the wrong time, or in the reverse. So over here, this kind of machshava does not passel it. However, Rabbi Eliezer paisel, Rabbi Eliezer says that it will be pasul even though it's not, he didn't think for what it was intended to be eaten for, rather for the person, for the Mizbeach, but it'll still be puzzle. And that's the Tana of our Mishnah. The Oira Alya of a lamb is supposed to be burnt on the Mizbeach, and the person is thinking that he is going to eat it out of its place, out of its time, it becomes puzzle or pigel. Says the Gemara, according to who are you saying our mission is going like? Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, but Amos Sefer. What does it say later on in the next Mishnah? There the Mishnah gives a rule. The rule is if one does these four avodas of shechting, receiving the blood, or bringing it to the Mizbeach, or spraying it on the Mizbeach, and it's regarding eating something that a person usually eats, or regarding burning something on the Mizbeach that's usually burnt on the Mizbeach. And regarding these things, in these avodas, he had the machshava either chutz l'zmanoi or chutz l'mekaimoi, then that machshava takes effect to passel the carbon. That's the klal the Mishnah says clearly in the next Mishnah. So the Gemara says, you clearly see, davish shadar kelechel in. But if he has this machshava that he is going to eat it out of its place or out of its time, regarding something that you don't usually eat, a person doesn't eat it, it goes for the Mizbeach, so then that machshava does not take effect. So also the Rabbanon, so the next Mishnah is clearly like the opinion of the Rabbanon. So this is a question. Reisha, Rabbi Eliezer, the Mishnah here that says that the Oir Ha'alya that's burnt on the Mizbeach, and the person's thinking that he is going to eat it out of its time, and it says that the machshava takes effect, that goes only with Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. The Sefer Rabbanan, the Sefer, the next Mishnah that gives the klal, that follows the Rabbanan's opinion. Says the Gemara, Amalei, so he said to him, who's over here? This is Shmuel's pshat. So Shmuel answered yes, this is the pshat in the Mishnah. The Reish is Rabbi Eliezer, and the Sefer is the Rabbanan. This is one pshat for our Mishnah. Ravuna says, Oir Alya. When it comes to the skin of the tail, this is just to clarify, this is not all of the skin of the tail. There's a part of the skin of the tail which is hard and is not edible. We're talking about a part of the skin of the tail which is further up, which is soft and edible. So this Oir Alya, lav ka'alya dami, it does not have the halacha like the tail itself regarding this detail. Regarding the mitzvah that you have to burn the tail on the Mizbeach, this mitzvah of burning the tail of the Mizbeach by a lamb does not apply to this skin of the tail, which is soft and edible. What's the source for this? Amar Rave or Amar Rabbe, my time with Ravona. What's the source for Ravona? Because in the pasuk where it speaks about burning the tail on the Mizbeach, it says Chelboi Ha'alya. The fats of the tail, whole tmima, should be burnt on the Mizbeach. So it says Chelboi Ha'alya. The tail, which is a fatty piece of the animal. So that excludes the skin of the tail that's not burnt on the Mizbeach, that the person could eat. So therefore the Mishnah here that's saying that he thought about this skin of the tail that he's going to eat it, that's another piece of the carbon that the person could eat, and therefore the machshava will take effect to passel it. So the ratio of the Mishnah fits even with the Rabbanan's opinion. Third pshat in the Mishnah, Rav Chisda says, the skin of the tail is like the tail itself that has to be burnt on the Mizbeach. So why is the Mishnah saying that the machshava for this will passel the carbon if he does not eat it? Because the Mishnah is speaking specifically about the tail of a goat. The tail of a goat does not have to be burnt on the Mizbeach. The whole halacha that the tail is burnt on the Mizbeach, it says it in the pasuk only regarding the tail of the keves, of a lamb. Therefore, the Mishnah here is speaking about the goat, which is not burnt on the Mizbeach. Okay, so we had the three pshatim here in the Mishnah. So the Gemara now explains, Kolo kishmol layamri. All of the other Amirayim did not want to say the pshat of the Mishnah like Shmuel because Reish Rabbi Eliezer, the Sefer Rabbanon, loy moikmi. They don't want to say this deichak that the Reish is Rabbi Eliezer and the Sefer is a different opinion, the Rabbanon. Kravona layamri. They didn't say like Rav Huna's answer because they disagreed with his drasha. Their opinion is that the skin of the tail is the same like the tail itself, which is burnt on the Mizbeach, so you can't make that distinction that Rav Huna said. Now, why did they not want to say Rav Chisda's pshat? Seems to be very simple. Rav Chisda is saying that our Mishnah is speaking about the skin of the tail of a goat, which is not burnt on the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, because if that's the case, my kamashmalon. What is the chiddush in this that the Mishnah points out this detail about the skin of the tail? Now, you would think maybe the chiddush over here is to say, Oyer alya ka alya dami. It's coming to say that the skin of the tail is soft and is edible, similar to the tail itself, which is soft. The skin of the tail is also something which is edible, and therefore, if he thinks that he's going to eat it, chutz l'zmaneh, chutz l'mekaymai, the machshava takes effect. But this point, that the skin of the tail is soft and edible, tanina. We learned that already in another Mishnah in Chulin, where it says, ve'elu she'oireiseyen kibisara. The following is where their hide is soft and therefore has the halacha like the basar itself. And this is a Mishnah which is telling you the halacha regarding the tumah, regarding the halachas of tumah, that it tells you that there are certain hides of animals that are soft enough that they have a halacha like food because it's edible. And one of the things it mentions there is or shetachas ha'alya, the skin that's under the tail that's soft, that is like the basar itself that you could eat. So there's no chiddush in our Mishnah that it singles out this halacha of or shetachas ha'alya, that this is something edible and therefore the machshava chutz l'zman chutz l'mekayim will passel, because it says this point in the Mishnah in Chulin. So the Gemara Rav Chisda says no, it says it regarding Toma, and we need the Mishnah to say it here regarding the carbon. Because I would think to say Toma, this halacha that the skin of the tail is soft is only regarding Tumah. The Rachich, since it's something which is soft, so therefore mitzdaref. It could combine to foods for the amount needed to become Tameh. Whether it's the amount of Kebeya, which is a shear by Tumas Eichlin, or by Tumas Nevelis, it's a Kazayas, as Rashi here brings. Aval Hocha, but over here regarding Kachim, where we're speaking about eating from a carbon. Here I would say, L'mashcha, the Torah uses the term L'mashcha, when the Kayanim eat from the carbon. And the taich of L'mashcha here means L'gedula, that you have to eat it with the right honor, with greatness. Rashi brings the Targum, says in the word L'mashcha here, L'rabu, which means it has to be eaten the way kings eat their food in a very honorable and geshmak way. Kederach sham malachim oichlin. And v'lo avidim malachim da'achli hachi. Kings, they do not eat from the skin, even the skin of the tail, which is soft, but they don't eat from this. So therefore, I would say that this is not something which is qualified for the eating of a carbon in the lashon of the pasuk l'mashcha, and therefore, if he thinks the machshavit to eat from the tail out of its place, or the skin of the tail out of its place, or out of its time, it would not passel the carbon. Kamash malan. Therefore, our Mishnah does have to repeat this halacha here to say that it is edible in the end of the day, and therefore the halacha of passeling the carbon through this machshavit does apply to the skin of the tail as well. Okay, so now the Gemara has a question on Rav Chisda's opinion. Rav Chisda, the basis of what Rav Chisda said was that the oil of the aliyah, the skin of the tail, is like the tail itself, that it's burnt on the mizbeach. He doesn't hold of what Rav Huna said, the distinction that Rav Huna said that we learned from Chelboy ha'aliyah, that the skin is not burnt on the mizbeach. So the Gemara asks, Meisvei, it says in the Braise, Hasheichet es ha'oila. When one shechts a carbon oila, and the Braise here, this is the diik that the Gemara is going to make, that it's speaking specifically about the carbon oila, which is a carbon that's completely burnt on the mizbeach. And he's shechting this carbon, lahakter kazayas me'oyer shetachas ha'aliyah chutz l'mekaymai. And he's thinking that a kazayas of the skin from the tail will be burnt outside of its place, so possible. It's possible, but ve'en by kares, this is chutz l'mekaymai, so it's possible, but no kares. However, chutz l'zmanai, if he thinks that he's going to burn it out of its play, out of its time, that is, then it's pigul chayavin olav kares, like the rule that we saw in our Mishnah. Now, Elazar ben Yehuda ish avlei, or ish avelim, probably it is.
Let's take it to the first word. It says put ve'en lo koret. And it says it's pigul v'chavim olav koret.
One is the first one is chutz l'mekaymai, and the second one is chutz l'zmanai. Okay. Okay. So now Elazar ben Yehuda ish avelim oimer. Mishom, in the name of Rabbi Yaakov, and v'chein haya Rab Shimon ben Yehuda ish kvar ikos mi'omer mishom Rab Shimon, that it's not only regarding the skin of the tail, but echad oyer beis parses. Now the point of it here is we're talking about skin or hide of the animal in areas where it's soft. The halacha by the carbon oila is that all of the oila is burnt on the mizbeach, besides the hide of the animal that goes to the kainin. But that's only the hide which is tough, which is not edible at all. But the hide which is edible instead of anyone eating it, it's burnt on the Mizbeach. And so the Tanakama here pointed this out regarding the skin of the tail, which is soft. Okay, but then these other Tanaim here are adding that there's more. When you look at the skin of the bottom, towards the bottom of the feet of the small animals, that skin is also very soft. And also the skin from the head of a calf, which is soft. And he also brings the skin that's under the tail. And the other skins that was mentioned in the Mishnah that we quoted before regarding Tumah, and that Mishnah begins with Ve'elu Shairisei Kipsadam, that their skin, their hide is soft, and it combines for Tumah like the meat itself. Now the Gemara explains, what is this adding? This is the skin by the animal, by its stomach, and by the place where Beis HaBaishes. So chutz l'mekaymai pasul, if he thinks that he's going to eat it out of its place, or that he's going to burn it, that is, out of its place, it's going to be pasul. Ve'ein by kares, but there's no kares. Chutz l'zmanai, if he thinks he's going to burn it out of its time, pigul v'chayav and all of kares. Then he will be chayav kares for this. Okay, now, so what's the diak of the Gemara here in this Mishnah, or Braisa rather? Oila in. It's pointing out over here all these different soft skins, including the skin of the tail, only regarding the carbon oila, since all of it is burnt on the Mizbeach. Aval zebach loi, but it doesn't give the example of any other regular carbon. It only gives the example of a carbon oila. Now, why doesn't it give an example? This could say the same regarding any other carbon. So the Gemara explains, according to Rav Hona, it's understood. It says only the oila because Rav Hona explained when it comes to any other carbon, there's a miyut. The pasuk says chelboy ha'alya, that by any other carbon, the skin is not the chelboy, is not the fats, and therefore it's not burnt to the mizbeach. So if you would have a machshava to burn it out of its place, out of its time, it wouldn't take effect. Only by the oila, which it is, that pasuk is talking about a shlomim, chelboy ha'alya. So by the oila, where you don't have that pasuk to exclude, so over here it's saying that the soft skin, including the skin of the tail, is burnt on the mizbeach. So therefore it says specifically the oila. But Rav Chisda, according to Rav Chisda, that doesn't dash in that pasuk. My area the tani oila. Why does it say specifically the oila? Listen, Zevach. It could say regarding any other carbon, the tail is burnt on the mizbeach together with the skin of the tail, and therefore it could say the same thing regarding any other carbon as well. That if he has the machshava to burn it out of its place or out of its time, it would passel. Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda will answer you, either this Braisa is speaking about the tail of a goat, so by a tail of a goat, by the other karbanis, it's actually not burnt at all on the Mizbeach. Only by the oila is it burnt on the Mizbeach. So therefore it says only the oila. Or tani zevach. You have to amend the word in the Braisa. Instead of oila, you read zevach, that by any other carbon, if it's a lamb, then you burn the entire tail with the skin on the Mizbeach, according to Rav Chisda, and therefore the machshava will have an effect regarding even the skin of the tail. Okay, this is focusing on one example that the Mishnah pointed out regarding the machshava. Now the Gemara goes back to the main halacha of our Mishnah. So the Mishnah said that if the machshava was chutz l'mekaymai, then it passes the carbon, but there's no kares. But if it's a machshava chutz l'zmanai, then it passes the carbon, and if you eat from it, it's kares. So the Gemara Miran Emili, what's the source for this? Alma Shmuel. So Shmuel says Trei Kroi Ksivi. It's because there are two psukim that tell us the psul of chutz l'zmanai and chutz l'mekaymai. Maihi, where are the two psukim? Omar Rabbe, so Rabbe says, and here we're quoting psukim from Parshas Tzav, where it speaks about the carbon shlomim, and there the Gemara quotes just parts of the pasuk, but the full pasuk there says, Vim he'ochel ya'ochel mepsar zevach shlomov b'yoyim hashlishi lo yerotze ha'makriv v'yisei lo yechoshev lo pigul yiyah v'nefesh ha'cheles v'mena v'yna tisa. That's the pasuk. Okay, so now in there's two parts to this pasuk. In the beginning of the pasuk it says shlishi, that he's eating it on the third day. It doesn't actually mean that he eats it on the third day. We'll see later in the Gemara Amud Beis. It'll explain how we know this. But what shlishi means is zeh chutz l'zmanai. That's the psul where the Kayin was thinking that he's going to eat it out of its zman. That's the first psul in the pasuk. Then when it adds again pigul yiyah, It says pigel, that it's pigel. Why does it have to say again that lashon that it's puzzle using this term pigel? Zel chutz l'mekaymai. This is adding to say that there's another kind of machshava that puzzles when he thinks that it's going to be eaten out of its place. That will puzzle it as well. Okay, just don't confuse this concept. Even though here the Gemara is saying that the term pigel in the pasuk is coming to be marbe chutz l'mekaymai, but the concept of pigel that we say usually in the Mishnah means that it's pigel that you would be chayiv kodesh. But in the lashon of the pasuk, after it said by Yom HaShlishi, which is the machshav of Shloi Bismanoi, when it adds pigel, it's coming to add that chutz l'mekaymai will be puzzle as well. Now, what does the pasuk conclude? It says v'hanefesh ha'echeles mimenu. The nefesh that eats from it, the pasuk concludes and says avoyna tisa, and as we'll see soon from the Gemara, even though it doesn't clearly say kodesh, but there's a gzeira shava that we learn out that avoyna tisa means kodesh. Okay, so now the pasuk is saying that there's kodesh here, but the thing is, the pasuk uses a singular term, hanefesh ha'echeles mimenu. That's echad v'lo shnayim. Even though the pasuk is referring to two different psulim, chutz l'zmanai and chutz l'mekaymai, but the kodesh is only for one of them, not for both of them. And which one is that one of them? Says the Gemara, zeh chutz l'zmanai. That's for the chutz l'zmanai, u'lemuute chutz l'mekaymai. But with the singular term, it's coming to exclude the machshava of chutz l'mekaymai. It'll be puzzle, but there's no kodesh. So the Gemara asks, well, how do you know to conclude this way? Why not say the opposite? That when it says in a singular term, maybe it's coming to say that if you have the machshava chutz l'mekaymai, then you chayiv kodesh. But if the machshava was chutz l'zmanai, then there'll be no kodesh. Says the Gemara, well, mistavre, it's logical to say chutz l'zmanai odif, that chutz l'zmanai is stronger to say that you chayiv kodesh because the pasuk pei. Since the pasuk begins with this psul, so therefore it's stronger. But the Gemara argues the opposite. Adarabah, on the contrary, chutz l'mekaymai yodef. It's a stronger reason to say that for chutz l'mekaymai you would be chayav kodesh because the samech lei. The psul of chutz l'mekaymai in the word pigel yiyeh, it says it right near where the pasuk concludes val nefesh ha'echeles mimenu avayna tisa, which is where you learn the din of kodesh from. So therefore, the Gemara is stuck. The Gemara cannot resolve how do we know that only for chutz l'zmanai it's kodesh and not for chutz l'mekaymai. Okay, now the Gemara, for the next Amud, basically, will try to bring a different source, but eventually the Gemara will refute that, as we'll see, and the Gemara will come back to this source that it says right over here, and it'll answer this question, as we'll see. Okay, but now the Gemara tries another source. Elo Amar Abaye, so therefore Abaye says, he said that Samech the Tana of our Mishnah that makes this distinction between chutz l'zmanai and chutz l'mekaymai, he's relying on what the Tana teaches as follows. And here the Gemara is going to point out, besides the pasuk that we just quoted in Parshas Tzav, there's another few psukim in Parshas Kedoshim where it also, again, there's similar psukim in Parshas Kedoshim where it speaks about this inyan. Okay, so in Parshas Tzav, we just saw the pasuk. It's actually one long pasuk. The Gemara later is going to call it the long pasuk of Parshas Tzav. Okay, but then you have, as I mentioned, the pasuk in Parshas Vayikra, and over there's three psukim actually. Okay, so let's see. The Gemara says as follows: when the pasuk says, this is in Parshas Kedoshim, Shlishi be Parshas Kedoshim Tiyu. So over there it also says the lashon of the pasuk there is v'me'achal ya'achal b'yayim hashlishi pigul lo yeratze. Similar to the pasuk in Parshas Tzav. So it's saying the term shlishi here, it's speaking about someone that is having the machshava chutz l'mizmanei. Okay, now she'ein tamid lo imad. It wouldn't be necessary to say this pasuk here. Why not? Sharei kvar ne'eman. It already says it in the pasuk before. V'me'achal ya'achal mipsar zevach hashlamim b'yayim hashlishi. So it already says in the lashon of the pasuk that you'll be chayiv, that it's going to be puzzle. Because this pasuk, this is referring to the pasuk that it says before in Parshas Tzav. Right? So over there, it already says this halacha. So why in Parshas Kedoshim, there's a repeat again, basically the same thing? So the answer is, since the second pasuk is not necessary to teach me again about the machshava of chutz l'zmanai, So even though the pasuk is saying a psul of chutz l'zman, because that's what bayem shlishi means, but it's coming to say that there's also an additional psul of chutz l'mekaymai. Okay, so now when you look over there in the psukim in Parshas Kedoshim, so there's 3 different psukim. They don't bring over here all the 3 psukim over here on the side of the Gemara, but you have the pasuk that we just quoted in Parshas Kedoshim. Okay. And then in the next pasuk, it says Va'oichla v'avoyna yisa. They have over here yeah, I'm looking at Amud Beis. No, but there's a pasuk before though. There's a pasuk before pasuk Zayin there. There's a pasuk Vav over there. Okay, in pasuk Ches is where it says the chorus. Va'oichla v'avoyna yisa ki is kodesh Hashem b'chil v'nichrisa ha'nefesh ha'ima me'her. Here's where it says chorus. Okay, let's see what the Gemara says here. Now, into the lashon of the Gemara. The Torah says an exclusion regarding Naisar, and it says Va'oichlav avaynai yisa, and that is l'mu'utei chutz l'mekaymai. It's coming to say that when is there the kadis only for chutz l'mekaymai, but not again. When is there kadis? That's for Naisar and not for chutz l'mekaymai. Okay, so where do you have Naisar here? So that's a pasuk before the pasuk that the Gemara is quoting here in Parshas Kedoshim, where it says the pasuk before says that you should not eat it b'yom hashlishi. 1 second, let me see a second again. If Rashi I think quotes the pasuk, it's pasuk Vav. Pasuk Vav, the pasuk over there says that you should not eat it on the 3rd day. I don't have the exact lashon of the pasuk yet, I don't remember, but there's in pasuk Vav, it says that you should not eat it on the 3rd day, and this is in Parshas Kedoshim. It says you should not eat it on the 3rd day. Then in pasuk Zayin, it says the pasuk that was quoted before, if you eat it on the 3rd day, pigalu lo yiratza. So what's the difference? In pasuk Vav, it's speaking about Naisar, that you should not eat it after its time. In pasuk Zayin, it's speaking about, as the Gemara just explained, chutz l'mekaymai, because in Eini and chutz l'zmana, it's speaking about chutz l'mekaymai. Then in the 3rd pasuk, in pasuk Ches, it says the kadis. So, and that kadis, the pasuk says va'oichla v'avoyna yisa. Only if you eat it, then you get kadis. It's coming to exclude something. So l'mutei chutz l'mekaymai. It's coming to say that for the Naisar, there's going to be kadis if you eat from it. But the Isser of chutz l'mekaymai, for that, there will not be kadis. So again, in Kedoshim, it says 2 Isurim. Naisar, and that's in pasuk Vav, and in pasuk Zayin, it says chutz l'mekaymai, and then in pasuk Ches, it says the kadis. But the kadis is only for one of these Isurim. Which one is it? Only for the Naisar and not for chutz l'mekaymai. That's what we learn out from here. Okay, so therefore, it's from here that I see that for chutz l'mekaymai, it's going to be possible, but there's no kadis, because the kadis that it says there is only going on the Naisar and not for chutz l'mekaymai. Okay, the Gemara questions is, how do you know? Ve'ema, maybe I would say, va'oichla v'avoyna yisa, when it says that if you eat from it, that there's an aveda, and it goes on one of the isurim that it mentions here in the pasuk, maybe zeh chutz l'mekaymai. Maybe it's coming to say that for chutz l'mekaymai, you would be chayav kadis, but olamutei Naisar mekadis. But the kadis, which it says in the pasuk before, in pasuk Vav, that is excluded from kadis. Says the Gemara, no, mistavre, Naisar havelei lo'ikmen bekadis. It's more logical to say that this pasuk here, when it says kadis, is referring to kadis by Naisar, which is the Naisar is when you eat from the carbon that's left over after its time. Why? Because lemigmar Avain l'chutz l'zmanoi, because now this will show us the gzeira shaveh that I implied before, the gzeira shaveh that we have to learn out from the lashon of the pasuk that it says here. And the pasuk says avayna yisa, and then it clearly says v'nichrisa. So there's kadis here. So we learn out gzeira shaveh from here to the pasuk that it says in Parshas Tzav. When it speaks about the machshava of chutz l'zmanai, what does the pasuk say there? As we had it quoted before, the pasuk there says, "V'nefesh hayecheles mimena avayna tisa." So when it says there avayna tisa, what does the avayna tisa mean? It means kadis. Why? Because I learned it out with this gzeira shaveh from the avayin that it says over here. Now, because the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, when it says Va'oichlav avayna yisa is speaking about Naisar. Therefore, it's logical to say that I learn not this Gzeira Shaveh to the pasuk of Avayna Tisa in Parshas Tzav to say that over there as well there will be Kaddish. Why do I learn it out? Because the Domile Bezav, because now the two that I'm learning out from each other are similar to each other in two details. Zayin Beis. What's the Zayin Beis? They're both Isurim that are connected to the fact that it's out of its time. Naisar is a carbon that you're eating out of its time, and the machshava of chutz lizmano in Parshas Tzav is when you thought to eat it out of its time, and also the beis is another thing they're similar regarding a bama. Both of these psulim, the machshava of chutz lizmano and eating it chutz lizmano, both of them apply to a bama. So therefore, I know to learn out this Gzeira Shaveh. Okay, just to explain this a little better, Rashi here explains, this is not usually something that we say by Gzeira Shaveh. Usually when you have Gzeira Shaveh, whether it's similar or not, you have two words in the Torah and you make Gzeira Shaveh. You don't have to have them to be similar. So Rashi explains that when it says over here in Parshas Tzav, the Lashon of Avayna Tisa, it's not clear. We know that there's a Gzeira Shaveh of Ovin, but it's not clear from where you should learn out that Gzeira Shaveh, because Rashi brings there's another place where the Torah uses a similar expression, the Nasa Aron es Avayna Kedoshim, which is regarding the basar of a carbon that became tamei, that the tzitz is meratza for it, and there'll be no kaddish over there. So maybe over here when it says Avayna Tisa, I should learn out from what it says by the basar of a carbon that becomes tamei, that there should be no kaddish at all. Adarabah, it should be meratza like it says by the tzitz. So therefore, in order to know that I have these two options of Gzeira Shaveh, either from the Tumah of Basar, or to learn it out from Avayna, what it says over here, Avayna Yisa by the Isser of Kaddish. So if you're going to say that this pasuk Avayna Yisa is talking about Kaddish, then I have a reason to say that the Gzeira Shaveh will be from this pasuk of Kaddish, this pasuk of Naisar, that is, to the pasuk of chutz lizmanai. Why? Because they're similar. These two have a similarity in two details. Zayin, Beis. They're both chutz lizmanai, and they're both a psul by a bama. If, however, this pasuk of Avayna Yisa would not be talking about Naisar, but it would be saying that you get kaddish for chutz l'mekaymai, then I would be stuck. There would be no reason to learn out this Gzeira Shaveh over the Gzeira Shaveh from what it says Ovain by the basara that's tamei. Because both of them are Gzeira Shaveh where they're not similar though. There's no reason to be medama them. So therefore, when I have this similarity, it's mistaber to say the similarity, so this will resolve to say that this should be the Gzeira Shaveh. That's the svara to say that the pasuk in Kedoshim is telling me that there's kaddish by Naisar, but there's no kaddish by chutz l'mekaymai. But the Gemara asks in this, there's an opposite svara as well. On the contrary, chutz l'mekaymai have a leiloikim b'kaddish. I would tell you that maybe in Parshas Kedoshim, when it says Avayna Yisa, it's coming to say that for chutz l'mekaymai, there's where you chayav kaddish. And what is it saying? Lemigmar avayin lechutz lizmanoi. There is a svara actually to compare from the machshava of chutz l'mekaymai to the machshava that's in Kedoshim to the machshava of chutz lizmanoi, which is in Parshas Tzav. Why? Because the domile there's actually a comparison between them in more things, and that is b'mikdosh. What is mikdash? Mem, kuv, dalet, shin. These are four different things. Mem is machshava. They're both a psul of machshava. Kuf, they're both a machshava, they're both a psul, even if it was only miktsas, like it said in the Mishnah, even if you thought that you're going to spray miktsas of the blood or eat miktsas of it out of its time or out of its place, it's similar by both of them that it will passel. And then the dalet is dam. These are both psulim that apply to the machshava you have regarding the blood, the shchita, the kabbalah, halacha, and the zrika. And shin, by both, chutz l'zmanei, chutz l'mekaymai, it says the same lashon in the pasuk. Besides avain, it says also by yom hashlishi. So therefore, I have these four different things to compare. So don't tell me that you have to say that the pasuk in Kedoshim is speaking about Naisar in order to know that the Gzeira Shaveh is from here to the pasuk in Parashas Tzav and not from Basar Tomei, a different place. Even if this pasuk would be speaking about chutz l'mekaymai, I have these other reasons to compare them, and these comparisons only apply to chutz l'mekaymai. None of these apply by basar tamei. So therefore, this can't be the reason why I'm comparing them. So therefore, the Gemara now says it accepts this question. So therefore, the Gemara says, Elam Rabbi Yechanan. So Rabbi Yechanan says, Tani Zavdi Bar Levi. Zavdi Balevi taught Asye Kodesh Kodesh. We learn out Gzeira Shaveh in the lashon of the pasuk here when it says Va'oichla v'avayne Yisa, but it also says Es Kies Kodesh Hashem Chila v'nichlas hanefshim ameh. This is in the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. It uses that term of Kodesh. So I learn out Gzeira Shaveh of another place where it says Kodesh. Ksiv here the pasuk uses the term as Kodesh Hashem Chila v'nichlas. Uksiv Hasam, and it also says V'sarafta san Neisar be'eish. You burn the Neisar in fire. And there, what does it say in the pasuk after that? Lo ya'achol ki Kodeshu. There it also says the term Kodesh. So therefore I say Mala Halon Naisar, just like there, it's clearly talking about Naisar and it uses the term Kodesh. Afkan Naisar. So to here, when it says Va'ichlav Avayne Yisar, uses the term Kodesh, it's speaking about Naisar. And the Gemara concludes, Umiyet Rachmana, the Torah is excluding and saying that Gabi Naisar, Va'ichlav Avayne Yisar, that only for Naisar do you say Avayne Yisar and that is Kodesh. But for chutzla mekaymai that says there in the pasuk before, that's excluded from kodesh. This is the conclusion that the Gemara is saying so far here, that it's because of this gzeira shav of kodesh that it excludes chutzla mekaymai. Okay, but now the Gemara is not done because the Gemara now goes back to the source of this whole concept. We had over here two psukim, a pasuk in Parshas Sav and a pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. And we said that the pasuk in Parshas Sav is chutzla zmanai, and then the extra pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim is chutzla mekaymai. So the Gemara asks on this, Omai chazis, what did you see to say? The kro aricha b'chutzla mizmanai, the longer pasuk. This is the pasuk in Parshas Sav. The Gemara wants to give a siman. It's a longer pasuk. It says, so the longer pasuk, which is in Parshas Sav, that you said is speaking about chutzla zmanai. And for that we have the Gzeira Shaveh to say that would be kodesh. Or Shlishi, the Parshas Kedoshim, but then when it says it again, Shlishi, the term Shlishi, and it says in the Parshas Kedoshim, Tia Chutzla Mekaymai. Here, it's speaking about Chutzla Mekaymai. How do you know to say this? Why wouldn't I say maybe the opposite is true? Maybe the pasuk in Parshas Tzav is speaking about Chutzla Mekaymai, and maybe the pasuk over here in Parshas Kedoshim is speaking about Chutzla Zmanai. Then it would come out the exact opposite, that I make Gzeira Shaveh to say that Yechayev Kodesh v'chutzla mekaymai, and chutzla zmanai, you potter from Kodesh. Says the Gemara, no, mistavre, well it's logical to say, Ariche, the longer pasuk in Parshas Tzav is b'chutzla zmanai. That pasuk is talking about chutzla zmanai. Why? Because as we said before, the Gomar, Ovain, Mim Naisar, the Domile, B'zayim Beis. Because then I know how to learn the Gzeira Shaveh. Because then the Gzeira Shaveh from this pasuk in Kedoshim, where it's speaking about Naisar, and I compare it to the pasuk in Parshas Sav, where it's speaking about Chutzla Zmanai, there's a similarity between them. The two similarities, as the Gemara said before, that they're both related to time, and they're both psulim in Abama. I forgot to mention before, the psul of Abama, no, but the psul by the Abama is not by Chutzla Mekaymai. By Abama, there's no such a psul of Chutzla Mekaymai. Abama you could have anywhere. So there's no psul of Chutzla Mekaymai. But Chutzla Zmanai applies by Abama, just like by Naisar. So therefore, in order to know what the Gzeira Shaveh is, it's logical to say that the pasuk in Tzav is Chutzla Zmanai. If it would be Chutzla Mekaymai, I wouldn't know how to make the Gzeira Shaveh. Says the Gemara Adarabe, but maybe I would say the opposite. Aricha, the longer pasuk in Parshas Tzav, should be b'chutzla mekaymai. Ushlishi, the Kedoshim, and then the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim should be Tia b'chutzla zmanai. That should be speaking about chutzla zmanai. Why is it more logical to say this? Mishum de domile. Because it's actually similar to the case of Naisar that the pasuk there speaks about. So therefore, Samchei, therefore the Torah brings up Chutzla Zmanai in Parshas Kedoshim, where it's speaking about Naisar, because Chutzla Zmanai is something which is similar to Naisar, so it makes sense that the Torah there is speaking about Chutzla Zmanai, similar to it, and not Chutzla Mekaymai, which is totally not similar, and the Kamamayatli. And then the pasuk is saying va'oichlav avaynoi yisa, avaynoi, singular term, to say only for Naisar, excluding chutzla zmanai. So we're back to our question that maybe we should say that the pasuk in Parshas Sav is speaking about chutzla mekaymai, and on that I'll say Gzeira Shaveh that Yechayev Kodesh, and in the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim it speaks about Naisar and about chutzla zmanai, and then the pasuk goes on to say va'oichlav avaynoi yisa, that only for Naisar Yechayev Kodesh, but excluding chutzla zmanai. So maybe for chutzla zmanai you should be potter from Kodesh. So therefore the Gemara now goes back to the original drasha that it said at Amud Aleph, that everything is learned out from the pasuk in Parshas Sav. Elo Amar Rava, so Rava says, Kulu Mikra Aricha Asyan. We really learn out everything. The halacha of Chutz L'Zmanoi, and the halacha of Chutz L'Mekaimai, and the fact that for Chutz L'Zmanoi there is Kares, and for Chutz L'Mekaimai there's no Kares. I learn it all out from the pasuk in Parshas Tzav. Now, the Gemara is going to bring here how you darshan the whole entire pasuk in Parshas Tzav with all the details. Not all of this is negay here for the point that we're looking for, but the Gemara goes through how you darshan that entire pasuk. And then in the end, it will conclude to answer the original question the Gemara asked before. Before the Gemara asked the question that over there you see that only for one of them there's Kares. And the Gemara asked, how do you know which one that is? How do you know that that one is Chutz L'Zmanoi and not Chutz L'Mekaimai? That was the question. So here the Gemara is going to come and answer that in a very simple way based on what we learned here. But the Gemara first goes through that whole long pasuk in Parshas Tzav and it explains every word. So we darshan the pasuk as follows. The pasuk in Parshas Tzav says, "He'achel ya'achel," that if you will eat, then it uses a double term. B'shtei achilas hakasav medaber. It's speaking about two eatings. Echad achilas adam, whether related to a person that's eating, or ve'echad achilas mizbeach, or if the mizbeach is consuming when you burn on the mizbeach or you spray the blood on the mizbeach, meaning that the halachis of the psul or of pigul applies regarding both of these kinds of achilas. Then it says Mipsar Zevach Shlomov. So why does it say Zevach, the Zevach of the Shlomim? Ma Shlomim, because we learn out here, just like by the Shlomim, there's Mefaglin or Mispaglin, meaning that there's parts of the carbon that you have to do certain Avedis that are matter then to eat later on, or to be makter on the Mizbeach later on. So what you do in the beginning, the Avedis, to be matter is called mefaglin. They can cause pigul, and then mispaglin. Then there's what you eat later, or what you burn on the Mizbeach that becomes pigul. There's two parts here. Afkol, so too, the din of pigul only applies when there's mefaglin or mispaglin. When there is the Avedis that are done, and then there's what you burn on the Mizbeach and what you eat. So there, the concept of pigul applies. But that excludes a case, Rashi says, this excludes a carbon mincha, where you just take the whole mincha and burn it all on the mizbeach. There's nothing that's shirayim, there's no leftovers that would become pigul from it, that would become pasul from it. So over there, the whole halacha of pigul does not apply. Then when it says in the pasuk the term shlishi zeh chutz l'zmanai, this is the machshava of chutz l'zmanai, that will pass the carbon. Then when it says lo yirotze, it's that it will not be accepted. What is the pasuk saying by this? Kahartzoas kosher, kein hartzoas pasul. We compare, just like the halacha when you're bringing a kosher carbon, and you have to complete everything properly until the end, till the spraying of the blood. So too over here, regarding the pigul, in order for the pigul to take effect, it's similar to the kosher carbon. Just like by a kosher carbon, when does it take effect fully? If you're matter, if you do all the steps until the zrika, then it should be then mutter to burn and to eat from it. Af hatzos pasul, so too. In order for the pigul to take effect, it's ad sheyikrivu kol matirov. That's only if all the other parts of the carbon were done properly, you sprayed on the mizbeach properly, then pigul will, the machshava of pigul will take effect, to pasul it, that you would be chayav kodesh. Then the pasuk says hamakriv, ba'akrovo nifsal. When is this pasuk speaking about? When you look in the simple pshat of the pasuk, it would seem like it's saying that if you eat it on the third day after its time, then it passes. But it's not what it means. When it says hamakriv, it means bahakrovo nifsal, that the pasuk is speaking about the machshava that you have when you makriv the carbon. That's what passes it. V'advein nifsal b'shlishi. It doesn't become pasul later on when you eat it after its time. Then when it says oisai, that the carbon becomes pasul, bezevach hakasim medaber, we're saying that the carbon becomes pasul. Ve'enim medaber b'kain. It's not saying that the kain that does this, he will become disqualified from serving in the Beis HaMikdash. When it says lo yechashiv, what does lo yechashiv mean? It simply means it should not be considered as a carbon, but it also means lo ya'arev by machshavais acheros, that you don't mix in any other machshavas into the machshava of pigul in order for it to be pigul. If there's another machshava, another psul besides the machshava of pigul that was mixed in, so then it's going to be it's not going to be pigul. It can be pasul, but it's not going to be pigul. Then when the pasuk uses the term pigul, zechutz l'mekaimai, it's adding again another psul here. So what is that adding? Chutz l'mekaimai. This is exactly like the Gemara said it in the beginning of this inyan, that this added word pigul is adding chutz l'mekaimai. When it says yihiyeh, Melame, this word is coming to say shemitztarfen ze im ze, that the two different machshavas of chutzlah mekaymai and chutzlah zmanai, the Torah is saying it's like it should be like one thing. That if it was a half a kazayas, a person is thinking that a half a kazayas I'll eat chutzlah zmanai and a half a kazayas chutzlah mekaymai, it could combine to passel the carbon. And then when it says v'hanefesh ha'echeles mimeno, that is echad v'lo shnayim. Here it's saying that it's only a singular, that one of these will become. It'll be Kodesh, that is. It says afterwards, Avayna Tisa, which is Kodesh, and it's only one and not two. Which one is Kodesh and which one is not? That only refers to Chutz L'Zmane, which is Kodesh. How do I know that it's the one for Chutz L'Zmane and not the one for Chutz L'Mekayim, which was really the original question the Gemara asked before? The answer is because where do we learn that when it says Avayna Tisa means Kodesh? It's learned from the Gzeira Shaveh of the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, where it says Avayna Yisa. Now we know that pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, when it said Avayna Yisa, what is it talking about? It's over there. It's talking about Naisar, and therefore I say the Gomar Ovein min Naisar. I learn out the Gzeira Shaveh of Ovein specifically from Naisar to Chutz L'Zmanai. Why? The Damile, B'Zayim Beis, because there's a comparison from Naisar to Chutz L'Zmane, and the two details mentioned before, that they're both regarding Zman, and they're both psulim that apply in Abama as well. Whereas if you would say that the Gzeira Shaveh is for Chutz L'Mekaymai, it's not similar in both of these details. So here's the answer to the question. How do we know that the Kodesh is only for Chutz L'Zmanai and not for Chutz L'Mekaymai? Because the Kodesh is learned with the Gzeira Shaveh from where? From Kedoshim, and there it's speaking about Naisar. So if I have an option to say that the Gzeira Shaveh goes on Chutz L'Zmanai or Chutz L'Mekaymai, the answer is it goes on Chutz L'Zmanai because it's similar to Chutz L'Zmanai. But it's not by Chutz L'Mekaymai though. There's no similarity of Naisar at all to Chutz L'Mekaymai. That's the conclusion of the Gemara. So Rashi says the Gemara only comes to this conclusion now, even though the Gemara simply could have just answered this point all the way in the beginning when I asked this question originally, but it waits over here until it brings up this point that we saw from before, that the pasuk in Kedoshim is speaking about Naisar, so therefore that's what's megala to me, that the Gzeira Shaveh to the pasuk in Parshas Tzav is the Gzeira Shaveh dafke the Chutz L'Zmane, which it's similar to, and not the Chutz L'Mekaymeh, where there's no similarity. That's the conclusion of the Gemara.